I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and I'm testing this stack of GameCube games today on the Retro Hunting Adventures. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to cut out a lot of loading times and screens that are unnecessary to watch. I'm going to get right to the action, like here with Barnyard for GameCube. And I knew nothing about this when I picked it up. I never saw the movie or the TV show or whatever this is, some sort of cartoon about cows and livestock, but this does appear to have some fun stuff in it. I found a nice mini game in the bonus section where you actually launch a chicken through the air and fly it like Star Fox. And I do mean like Star Fox because when the chicken is in the air, you're pushing down to go up and up to go down. It's like a flight stick. You really are controlling it like an airplane. And because I was not familiar with that control scheme, having never played this before, I ended up missing a lot of these targets. It seems you have to fly through the rings to gain power-ups, or else your chicken runs out of gas and stops being able to hover in the air. So eventually, I just go splat here because I missed too many rings. If I'd known that in advance, maybe I would have done better. But with a little practice, I feel like I could get good at this mini game, which makes me actually want to explore the rest of what Barnyard has in store. I feel for a few bucks that was a worthy pickup. Now, FIFA 2006 World Cup, I'm hardly going to spend any time on that. It was a cheap pickup because it was a sports game. I just want to make sure it's a working game. Always remember to check your discs when you buy them. Disc-based media more so than cartridges, because if it's scratched or unplayable, you want to be able to return it or try to resurface it or both. So, speaking of which, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This one looks like it was probably used quite a bit based on the scratched up, scuffed up cover, but the disc itself looked okay when I examined it in the store, and it seems to be playing in my Wii just fine. I generally use my Wii to test my GameCube games, and then if I'm going to play them on a regular basis, I take them upstairs and put them in my old GameCube with the Eon HD adapter hooked up to a 32-inch HD TV. Now, I had to cut a huge chunk of the intro there because of the James Bond music. You don't want that hearing. You'll get a copyright strike almost immediately for that. And also, there's dialogue from James Bond and Dame Judi Dench, so had to cut it right there as well. So we move on to Killer 7, which is a 2-disc game, but I spliced together testing both of these discs because the first disc and the second disc have the exact same intro sequence as you're about to see here. And once you complete that intro sequence on disc 2, it will ask you to put in disc 1. So I was satisfied that both of these discs were tested and working, which makes me very happy that I picked up this game. Killer 7 is a little hard to find and occasionally kind of pricey. So moving on to Rocket Power Beach Bandits, which is neither of those things. You can find that easily, and it only costs you a few bucks. But I think there may actually be more to this game than I expected. Much like Barnyard, there's a little hidden depth in here. This skateboarding mini game that I found actually controls pretty well and was fun to try out for a few minutes. It reminded me of some of the old school Tony Hawk games, but maybe actually controlled a little better. The only thing I couldn't really figure out how to do was to do any tricks like sliding on a rail or jumping off the board and landing on the board again. I need to look at the manual that comes inside of the game and see if I can get all the button combos for the different tricks you could do. All I could do was get started, kick push, get my speed up going back and forth on these ramps, and then do some leaps in the air. I could also rotate in mid-air, but I never really got any more sophisticated with it than that. Still, I think you can tell from the fact that I kept playing and didn't cut this off immediately that I was actually enjoying this quite a bit. and I wanted to explore this area further, so I was like, man, let's see if I can go land on something and do a slide. Let's go see what's outside of this environment. It looks like there's areas you can skate on both sides, but then I wiped out immediately, which was my cue to take it out and try Smashing Drive instead. And once again, for a game that only cost me a few bucks, there was a little more depth here than I expected. Now, I was a little worried about how well this one would work because it said it was a Blockbuster rental, and the thing really seemed to chug while I was loading it up. But once I got it loaded, I discovered a very arcade action smash racing driving style game. I mean, it is called Smashing Drive, so that's not too much of a surprise, but look here, you're busting through a mall, pedestrians are jumping out of the way, you're knocking over kiosks, you're crashing through walls, you're sliding across airplanes and driving down runways. I mean, this is the kind of insanity you would expect from Crazy Taxi, which I think you could say it's an inspiration for, if not maybe a direct rip-off of. And I'm not too mad about that because Crazy Taxi is a very fun game too. So, Smashing Drive, if you ripped off something, at least you ripped off something good. So, you're not going to catch me complaining. This one really sucked me in, and I wanted to play more, but I have more games that I need to test. So, I'm going to go until my timer runs out here, and then at that point, I'll take a break. Look at that boost, though. That's just insane. It's like somebody slapped a giant rocket on the back of this car. So, it even looks like a taxi. You'd be hard-pressed to not say this is a ripoff of Crazy Taxi. I'm sure reviewers said that about this game back in the day. So I failed whatever mission I was supposed to do there, which is fine, because I need to move on to another racing game, Street Racing Syndicate. This is another one I was worried about because the cover looked really wrinkled and beat up. Like this one had been mishandled, and you can hear my Wii in the background just chugging, even more so than Smashing Drive. It's going click, 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 clickety click. But the game loaded, and it does seem to work, so let's see here. Which button do I need to accelerate with? Oh, there we go. Should have looked at the manual first. So I'm already in 4th place, but this is one of those very forgiving games like Mario Kart where even if you're way, way behind, you can still catch up to the other drivers. Because I can see them in front of me already. And I'm 4th out of 4, so it won't be too hard to get to 1st place, even though I have no idea how to drift and I don't have any idea how to boost, but there I am in 1st place anyway, so to me, that's a good enough test for now. This might be an overly easy racing game, but then again, it may just be the introductory level that's that easy to play, and then it gets a lot harder as you go along. So I'm going to be somewhat forgiving and say there may be more to it. Moving on to True Crime, Streets of LA, which came with a code inside for how to unlock Snoop Dogg in your game. That was a nice bonus. I was pleasantly surprised by that. Now, because this is an M-rated game like Killer 7, I'm not going to play too much of it here. I don't want to get any sort of flags for that, so I'm just basically proving that the game works by fiddling around with the menu options and seeing what it does when I choose various things to make sure it's read in all the data from the disc and is processing it correctly on my Nintendo Wii running in GameCube emulation mode. And it does seem to be working just fine. Last but not least, we have Battalion Wars for the GameCube. This is another one of those not so easy to find GameCube games. It's not as pricey as Killer 7, but it's hard to find a copy complete in the box with the manual. I found one once at Half Price Books, had no manual inside, so I passed on it. Then I found it again just recently, and this time I found it at a store that had it complete for only $10, so it was cheaper than the Half Price Books with no manual, and this one was complete, so I couldn't hardly say no at that point. And this is another one of those games that I saw had the potential to suck me in if I gave it the chance to. So I'm actually going to let this intro run for a little bit and talk about how it was basically more than I expected when I put it in, because I was expecting turn-based strategy where you move your army, the AI moves their army, you move your tanks, the AI moves their tanks, and you try to gain the advantage on the battlefield. But what I actually got when it gets past this intro was a section that shows a behind-the-camera perspective of your individual soldier going through a training exercise. He gets to practice his aim, he gets to practice looking around at the area using the right trigger and the analog stick to point the camera. He gets to actually involve himself in the combat. So I'm not saying it isn't turn-based strategy, but it also seems to involve actually getting to do stuff as opposed to just directing people to do stuff. So it could very well be a mix of those two things, but it was definitely more than I expected, and it appears to even have some plot with this overbearing army commander who says his troops are getting soft, even though he looks pretty soft himself, and he wants his troops to be whipped into shape so they can go take on the pseudo-Russian Eastern group that is apparently dug in across this demilitarized zone. So he's war hungry, he's a warmonger, and you're just a lowly recruit at this point who's a member of his troops. It would be interesting if the game actually showed us that same perspective from the Eastern Army's side, how they were getting yelled at by a warmongering general on their side, and they were just there for a paycheck and to do whatever duty they were as an enlisted man, and didn't really have any say in the politics of the whole thing. But I'm just going to imagine that their experience on their side of the DMZ is probably just the same as my experience on my side. So here you see, you go to the gold star, and it shows you what you need to do. You need to leap over these obstacles using a button. Then you need to aim at these targets, and you get a locking mechanism where you can lock onto the targets by using the L button, and then it aims at them automatically when you shoot. So it's teaching you how to play the game, and not doing so in a tedious way. I mean, it may be a typical tutorial, but it's not an unwelcome tutorial. I actually appreciate it when you don't read the instructions for a game, but they will offer you the chance to learn how to play it in the game anyway. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching.